During the pitch-black night of August 8th, 1963, a Royal Mail train was barreling down the tracks, making its routine overnight run from Glasgow to London. Hidden inside one of its many cars were massive mail bags packed with cash, an astronomical sum totaling what would be roughly £67 million, or nearly $85 million in today's money. The train's seasoned driver, Jack Mills, was confidently pushing the powerful engine through the darkness. Suddenly, a bright red signal light flared up at an upcoming crossing. Welcome to another video from Voxen TV. If you love stories like this, hit that subscribe button. It's the easiest way to keep us bringing you more. For Jack, this was incredibly abnormal. A red light at this specific time and place made absolutely no sense. Regardless, rules are rules. He slammed on the brakes, bringing the massive train to a grinding halt in the middle of absolutely nowhere. For a brief moment, a dead silence fell over the track. But lurking just behind that silence was a master plan about to execute the greatest heist of the century, the Great Train Robbery. A heist where they didn't just rob the train, they practically stole the entire thing. This sounds exactly like the plot of a Hollywood blockbuster, but in real life, a crew of highly organized criminals pulled off a suspense-filled, meticulous plan to rob a British government train of millions of pounds without firing a single bullet. It all started several months earlier when a few well-known criminals in London sat down to brainstorm their next massive score. Bruce Reynolds, the absolute mastermind behind the plan, began plotting an unprecedented heist with a few close associates. He possessed a piece of highly classified information regarding the Royal Mail, Britain's national postal service. He got this top-secret intel from a senior Royal Mail security officer, a mysterious inside man whose true identity remained a secret to everyone. The intel was gold. The overnight train from Glasgow to London always hauled a highly secure carriage known as the High Value Package Coach, or HVP. On one very specific upcoming day, that coach would be transporting an unimaginable amount of raw cash. That was their target. While Bruce Reynolds and his crew were highly experienced criminals, they had absolutely zero experience robbing moving trains. So they brought in another notorious London outfit known as the South Coast Raiders, who specialized in exactly this kind of operation. The crew slowly expanded, eventually growing to over 15 men. They made a strict pact. They were going to hijack a government train and rob it completely blind, but no guns were to be used. This wasn't a simple stop the train and grab the bags kind of job. It required months of agonizingly detailed planning. On August 7th, 1963, at 6:50 p.m., the Royal Mail train rolled out of Glasgow Central Station, scheduled to arrive at London's Euston Station the next morning at 4 a.m. The train was hauling 12 carriages, with 72 postal workers inside, sorting the mail non-stop throughout the night. This specific train was designed exclusively to drop off mail and parcels at various cities along the route. In fact, they didn't even stop at most stations. The local postal staff at each station would hang mail bags on special elevated racks. As the train roared past, the crew inside would use massive mechanical nets to literally snatch the bags right out of the air and simultaneously toss the outgoing mail bags directly onto the platform. It was an incredibly efficient system designed to keep the train moving. But the actual carriage targeted for the robbery wasn't even attached to the train yet. It was sitting securely parked down the line at the Nini Valley railway station. This was the HVP coach, holding massive quantities of cash from registered mail and money orders being sent between cities. Now, 3 years prior, in 1960, the Post Office Investigation Branch ordered the installation of advanced security alarm systems on all HVP coaches to prevent exactly this kind of scenario. By 1961, 3 new coaches were fully equipped with these alarms, and the older, unalarmed coaches were relegated to backup reserve status. But the day of the robbery was perfectly aligned by fate or inside information. On that specific day, all the alarm-equipped HVP coaches were completely out of service. As a result, the railway was forced to use a reserve coach, carriage M3024M, which had absolutely 0 security alarms installed. This was a massive, critical tip provided by the Royal Mail Insider. When the train finally arrived at Nini Valley Station, the railway staff hitched the unalarmed HVP coach right behind the main engine. That was the first piece of inside intel confirmed. But the second tip was even more crucial. Normally, an HVP coach carried around 300,000 pounds. That was the second tip. It was the perfect storm, nearly 10 times the normal amount of cash, sitting completely unguarded in a broken-down reserve coach. But to the robbers, this was no coincidence. They had been meticulously planning for this exact night for months. With a massive payload secured directly behind the engine, the train departed Nini Valley. It was the dead of night, and 58-year-old driver Jack Mills was pushing the train hard toward London. But miles ahead, lurking in the thick bushes near the railway tracks, the gang was lying in wait. Their plan was flawless. Around 3 a.m. on August 8, 1963, a gang member climbed up to the Sears Crossing signal light. He shoved a heavy leather glove over the green light to completely black it out, and then used a portable battery pack to power up the red stoplight. Then, they vanished back into the darkness and waited. When the train approached Sears Crossing, Jack Mills was utterly confused by the red light. Trains, especially the Royal Mail, were never, ever stopped at this specific crossing. But he had no choice. He hit the brakes and brought the train to a halt right at the tampered signal. A heavy, unsettling silence fell over the track. The assistant driver, also known as the second man, climbed down from the massive engine to use the trackside telephone to contact the signalman and find out what was going on. But when he picked up the receiver, the line was completely dead. The gang had already sliced the communication cables. Just as the second man turned around to head back to the engine, the robbers exploded out of the bushes and instantly overpowered him. Simultaneously, several gang members scrambled up both sides of the engine car to take control of the driver. When Jack Mills bravely fought back, one of the robbers struck him over the head with a heavy iron bar, knocking him completely unconscious right in the driver's seat. This was a highly coordinated military-style operation. While the struggle was happening in the engine, other gang members were busy uncoupling the main engine and the first 2 carriages, including the HVP coach, from the rest of the massive train. Their plan was to completely hijack the front half of the train and drive it away. But where to? About a mile down the track from Sears Crossing was Bredigo Bridge, where the gang's getaway trucks were hidden in the darkness. They had actually brought along a retired railway driver specifically to drive the hijacked train to the bridge. Everything was going perfectly according to plan, until they hit their first major disaster. The retired driver they brought along climbed into the engine, looked at the controls, and completely panicked. This was a newer diesel model he had never operated before in his life. Desperate, the gang forcefully woke up the bleeding Jack Mills and forced him at gunpoint to drive the train the remaining mile down the track. The engine and the 2 attached carriages slowly pulled away, leaving the remaining 10 carriages and the rest of the postal staff sitting in the pitch black, completely unaware that the front half of their train had just been stolen. When they reached Bredigo Bridge, the gang brutally smashed their way into the HVP coach. They overpowered the 5 postal workers inside, beat them, tied them up, and threw them face down on the floor. Then, the real work began. Inside the coach were 128 massive mail bags, absolutely stuffed with £1, £5, and 10-shilling note. The total weight of the cash was roughly 2.5 tons. The train was parked up on the bridge, and the getaway truck was waiting on the dark road directly below. According to their meticulous timeline, they had exactly 15 minutes before they had to vanish. They quickly formed a human chain and rapidly hurled 120 of the heavy bags down the embankment and into the waiting truck. Because they strictly adhered to their 15-minute window, they were forced to leave 8 bags behind. The heist had been executed with absolute perfection. But as they were leaving, one of the robbers made a single massive mistake that would ultimately lead to their downfall. Before jumping off the train, he yelled at the tied-up postal workers, warning them not to move an inch for exactly 30 minutes, or they would be killed. The gang sped off in a massive Austin Lodestar truck packed with the cash, flanked by 2 Land Rovers. To confuse any potential witnesses, all the getaway vehicles had identical fake license plates reading BMG 757. After a tense 45-minute drive, they arrived at Leatherslade Farm, their massive, secluded hideout, located about 27 miles away from the bridge. Throughout the drive, they were actively listening to police radio chatter on a VHF scanner, which gave them a massive tactical advantage. The exact moment they arrived at the hideout, the police officially caught wind of the robbery. But the gang wasn't worried. They were absolutely euphoric. They celebrated wildly at the farm, even playing a game of Monopoly using massive stacks of the real stolen cash. But their celebration was brutally short-lived. Minutes later, the radio scanner crackled to life, and they heard the police announce they were establishing a massive 30-mile search radius around the hijacked train. How did the police know exactly where to look? The postal workers told them the robbers explicitly demanded they wait exactly 30 minutes before moving. The police brilliantly deduced that the gang's hideout must be within a 30-minute drive, roughly a 30-mile radius. Panic instantly set in. The gang had originally planned to lay low at the farm until Sunday, but now they had to evacuate immediately on Friday. On Thursday, they frantically divided the staggering £2.6 million. According to reports, the main players each walked away with around £150,000, which is the equivalent of roughly $3.9 million today. They paid off the minor helpers and prepared to run. Before leaving on Friday, they meticulously wiped down every single surface in the hideout to destroy their fingerprints. They paid one man a massive sum with one specific job: wait until everyone is gone and then burn the entire farmhouse to the ground to destroy any remaining evidence. But the man took the money and completely vanished without ever lighting the match. Meanwhile, the police were tearing the entire Buckinghamshire area apart. Helicopters scoured the skies, massive convoys of police cars locked down the roads, and the national media was in an absolute frenzy. The police announced a massive £10,000 reward for any solid information. A neighbor living near the hideout heard the reward and immediately called the police, reporting that there had been a suspicious amount of heavy vehicle activity at Leatherslade Farm in the early hours of August 8th. The police instantly raided the farm. Inside the unburned house, they found a mountain of damning evidence: empty mail bags, discarded mail, and a truck that had been hastily painted yellow. While the gang had wiped down most of the surfaces, they made one fatal error. Remember that game of Monopoly they played with the stolen cash? The police found the Monopoly board, and it was absolutely covered in perfect, unsmudged fingerprints. Because almost every member of the gang had a prior criminal record, Scotland Yard easily matched the prints to their files, instantly identifying the masterminds behind the heist. Within days, the police hunted down and arrested 14 of the 16 gang members. Only 2 men managed to vanish completely: the retired replacement train driver, whose real name nobody actually knew, and the mysterious Royal Mail inside man who provided the intel. To this day, the true identity of the inside man remains one of Britain's greatest unsolved mysteries. The courts labeled it the crime of the century and slammed almost every member of the gang with crushing 30-year prison sentences. Following the heist, Bredigo Bridge was famously renamed the Train Robbers Bridge, an informal title it still holds today. As for Jack Mills, the brave 58-year-old train driver, he suffered severe head trauma from the iron bar and was never able to return to work. He never fully recovered from the violent trauma and tragically passed away just 7 years later. Thanks for watching Voxen TV. If this story was worth your time, drop a like and hit subscribe. It genuinely helps us grow. See you in the next one.